Round up your scepters and put your enemies to bed, because it is once again time for another lore video. Last time we talked about the beginning of the Scholars Strife, a nice little story told within the Unknowable Domain. This time we are going to continue our story, finishing the Scholars Strife itself, just to have our first official and, might I say, very dangerous meeting with Polka Kakamont. Let me tell you right away, this story was absolutely insane. At some parts my head exploded because I had no idea what the hell was going on. For those of you new to this, I would advise you to watch part 1 first, otherwise all of this is not going to make any sense. But before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe and leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We start our story when Polka Kakamont disappears after having killed Monique, and once again she leaves more than just a corpse in her wake. She leaves questions. One of those is a signal, one that our resident scholar Patavia has been chasing for years. It is a signal so persistent, so incomprehensible, it is practically taunting her. So, what is the big deal when it comes to our signal? To Patavia it is everything. A solitary ray from a higher dimension, something that doesn't decay, doesn't distort, and defies the usual laws of space and time. In short, it is a mystery. And as any good scholar will tell you, mysteries are meant to be solved. Think of it as a cosmic game of hide and seek, except the seeker is obsessed and the prize is understanding the entire universe. If she can find the source of the signal somewhere out there in the endless cosmos, Patavia believes she will finally understand one of the oldest questions in existence. Is the universe deterministic, or is it just one big cosmic accident? This question stands at the very core of our story and appears again and again. The same also applies to our circle of knowledge and knowledge singularity aspects, which become extremely important later on. But don't worry, I will explain them again in due time. Meanwhile, back at the School of Evolutionary Perfection, things are spiraling out of control. The latest project, a nasty little anti-organic virus, gets loose, spreading through their entire system and corrupting everything it touches. Turns out unleashing a virus to merge flesh and metal wasn't such a great idea. Who could have guessed? Over 120 scepters go down, infected beyond repair, and in a twist of irony, the scholars who created this disaster are banned from ever touching a scepter again. Defunded, defunct, and disgraced, the school was never able to regain its former glory. As for Patavia, her obsession with the signal leads her straight to a place called the Cosmic Library of Ismael, the so-called greatest repository of knowledge in the universe. She's joined by Herta, disguised of course, and together they take part in a protest against the Intelligentsia Guild's stranglehold over the Scepters. For context, Patavia did gain access to a scepter in her past, but due to a series of failed experiments her access got revoked. This happened all over the place, resulting in the access to our scepters being limited to a handful of individuals and schools. This, for example, is how the School of Evolutionary Perfection ended up owning 120 scepters. Effectively, the higher up you were in the food chain, the more scepters you had, and because of that, people were pissed and started to protest. Returning to our protest itself, things get messy fast. In the ensuing chaos, a stray weapon malfunction leaves a part of the library in ruins. It is the ultimate bad omen. Knowledge is literally turning to dust in front of our eyes. This destruction deepens the distrust between the guild and the very scholars they claim to serve. But then, a breakthrough. Patavia's studies of the signal reveal something unexpected. It is not just a random anomaly. It is a solitary wave, as mentioned before, a consistent pattern which defies decay and distortion. And this does not happen by accident. Someone or something must be behind it. And in order to spoil everyone right away, because why not, it's a lore video, and to make you understand why it is so important, the entity behind it is Nous, Aeon of Erudition. This discovery changes everything. Patavia becomes a sensation, an authority in her own right. Scholars turn away from the old guard, inspired by her conviction that anyone, not just the so-called elite, can pursue the truth. She believes that there are only two types of people. Either you are born a genius or you are born a mundanite, someone ordinary. And our dear scholar believes that she belongs to the second group, which is very ironic considering everything that is going to happen to her. With the Intelligentsia Guild doubling down on its control, resistance sparks into open rebellion. One such example happens on a planet called Clostia, which descends into chaos as people rise up against the Intelligentsia Guild, shattering the very system they once relied on. While all of this is happening, Patavia boards a spaceship called the Rippling Waves and heads straight into the heart of Rubert's empire to a place only a few dare to tread, the Iron Throne. Not that Iron Throne, no, a whole planet called the Iron Throne. It is a risky move and she's on her own entirely, but she goes there as she believes her signal is coming from said planet, effectively the homeworld of Rubert the I. But when you're chasing the secrets of the universe, aspects like safety don't rank very high on your priority list. And as Patavia arrives, she makes an incredible discovery. A small star circling the planet, hiding Rubert's very core. Veiled in imaginary energy, its power echoing through time and space. Remember how we mentioned in part 1 that there is a presence behind the Scepters? In the ruins of Rubert's empire, Patavia finds this presence. Rubert the I itself, the access point to every single scepter out there. It is beautiful, strange and terrifying. This core, Rubert's crown, his legacy, she could wield it and break through the circle of knowledge. But as she reaches out to claim her prize, she hesitates. And as she does so, a pastel-colored robe drifts into view, and Patavia turns to see a familiar figure. A woman, serene and otherworldly, standing beside her. A figure of myth. A slayer of emperors is here, watching her. For a moment, Patavia remembers every conversation they ever had. Every piercing remark this woman made. However, Patavia does not know who she really is. But we do. Polka is back. And she doesn't have to say a word. Just her presence alone is enough to remind Patavia of her own limitations. She decides to not use Rubert's crown and by extension the Scepters. Instead, she does something which is going to have massive consequences for her. Patavia looks up, praying to Nous, asking for a moment of true understanding. And in response, a flood of data and insight fills her mind. In this instant, Nous answers. Patavia's mind expands, an ocean of knowledge flowing through her so vast it nearly breaks her. She sees her signal, the solitary wave, and realizes it is only a tiny ripple in a much grander design. A fragment of a truth she will never fully comprehend. Years later, Herta stands where Patavia left off, in awe of the genius and the insanity it took to pursue the solitary wave. She knows that, in a way, Patavia had touched something forbidden, an ultimate truth that the history fictionologists decided to cover up not out of malice, but to spare the minds of lesser scholars. In order to make this a little bit easier to understand, let me explain it in more detail. Patavia was blessed by Nous, and she herself was already a formidable scholar to begin with. However, she was still not able to solve the solitary wave, and this is what they decided to cover up. Just imagine the backlash it would have when people find out that even a renowned scholar like Patavia was not able to solve it, even though she was gazed upon by Nous. It would be demoralizing for every other scholar out there. This is why they decided to cover it up. However, I want to spoiler this right away, the solitary wave was solved later on by someone we all know, but I will keep that person's identity a secret for now. Patavia, after her encounter with Nous, returned safely. She wrote down her theories regarding the solitary wave and by doing so created an enigma which would trouble the minds of many scholars for many decades to come. She herself became a doctor of great renown and would spend the rest of her life in the pursuit of knowledge. There are a few more elements regarding Herta and Patavia, but we will talk about that in a moment. For now, I want to focus on effectively the last act of our Unknowable Domain storyline. A story which takes place in the present. We are still in our simulated universe, but we are no longer looking back at past events. Instead, what happens as we continue to explore the Unknowable Domain is something that took me by surprise. As we return, Herta realizes something is wrong. The domain is glitching, fracturing, as though someone or something is trying to interfere. It is supposed to be a controlled experiment, but now not so much, and she has a pretty good idea for who is responsible. As Herta turns to the Trailblazer, we can hear Polka Kakamon's voice echo through the entire simulation. Calm yet unsettling. She says the following: "Herta, it is time to stop this little game you've concocted. Come join me for a dance before I sever your path with my scalpel." That's right, Polka's back and she is not here to play. She's here to stop Herta's experiment from moving any further. To her, this is no harmless simulation, it is a potential disaster waiting to happen. Polka continues by saying the following: "I received your invitation, but I didn't come here to join your little experiment. I came to put an end to it. I come to kill the myriad of chaotic possibilities you would unleash." Polka's intentions here are very clear. She's here to prevent Herta from achieving her so-called knowledge singularity, an event which could disrupt everything the Aeons stand for. To Polka, the simulated universe isn't a tool for enlightenment. It is a trap which could unhinge reality itself. Herta and the Trailblazer make a break for it, racing through the entire simulated universe as Polka gains ground. As they run, the system begins to crumble. First, we lose access to our Scepter system, then our Curio system, and soon we are left with nothing but raw data and a rapidly shrinking environment. Polka's voice echoes again, taunting us in the process. "You can't hide from inevitability, Herta. Your little game ends here, inside the circle you will never break." However, as Polka pursues us and our chances for survival begin to dwindle, our remaining simulated universe crew appears. Steven restores access to our Curio and Scepter system, Ruin May as always completely breaks the game, and Skrulum, well, let's just say he has prepared a trap. With the help of Herta's allies, they are able to regain some ground, but Polka's power seems endless. As the Trailblazer and Herta fight to keep the simulation intact, Polka only becomes more determined. She's not here for revenge, she's here to erase a possibility, a knowledge singularity which she deems heretical. What she's going to say now is very important when it comes to her entire ideology. It perfectly explains who she is and why she's doing what she's doing. Every moment you push against the boundaries, you defy the perfection nous represents. A knowledge singularity is nothing more but a stain on the design. All who defy that perfection are only worthy of silence. To Polka, any attempt to break the circle of knowledge is a sin. She sees herself as the guardian of nous design. And anyone who tries to escape the circle, who tries to glimpse beyond, is a threat. This is effectively Polka's ideology. She is, at her most basic core, I guess you could say, a fanatic zealot of nous. I feel this is the easiest way of explaining who Polka Kakamon really is. Also, in case you did not watch part 1, the Circle of Knowledge refers to all the technology we have unlocked as a race. For example, my microphone, your computer, our abilities to talk, to write, to read, stuff like that. A knowledge singularity refers to a moment when someone breaks this circle of knowledge by creating an invention or by learning a truth regarding our universe, for example, which is going to fundamentally change life itself. For example, fire being discovered, electricity, the internet in more modern times, or in Star Rail lightspeed travel. This is what Polka refers to here. She effectively stops every single knowledge singularity from happening because they would be a stain on nous' design. As simple as that. This would technically open up a lot of possibilities regarding nous being an enemy, because the way I look at it is the same as our birdcage metaphor we had during our Penacony storyline. However, in this case, the entire universe is our cage and we are the birds. Nous is the jailer and Polka is his enforcer. Yet, it entirely depends on how Polka always knows where and when to appear. As simple as that. If you want me to talk about it in more detail, let me know in the comments. There are a lot of theories out there regarding all of this, and I feel like it is fairly interesting. But for our video purpose here, I feel like this would be too much. Still, I will also be super honest here. This part was extremely difficult to understand, so if you have another take, or maybe I got it completely wrong, then let me know in the comments below. As our story continues, Herta eventually triggers Skrulum's trap, which ends up being completely useless. As a last measure of resort, Skrulum opens up the simulated universe for any type of chaotic element to enter, and quite literally, chaos itself enters. Aha, the Aeon of Elation. Polka is completely thrown off balance by this, and for the first time ever her calm facade slips. Aha's presence disrupts her focus, forcing her to confront an unpredictability even she can't control. And in a final desperate move, Herta activates every single scepter within our simulation. The scepter's power fills our simulation, creating a grand display of light and energy as Herta stands at the center. However, nothing happens. Our scepters power down without answering any of her questions. Our heroes, our characters are effectively out of options. Cornered and unable to defend themselves, all they can do now is to wait for Polka to kill them. But she doesn't do so. She tells us that we remained within the circle of knowledge, and because of that we are no longer a threat. Her form begins to dissolve and her figure fades into various data streams as the Unknowable Domain itself begins to shut down. Herta stands alone, surrounded by the remnants of her vision, a glimpse at something beyond, something that will remain just out of reach. For all her ambition, for all her genius, the circle of knowledge is as impenetrable as ever. Which effectively brings our story to an end. It was a first introduction to Polka, not just as a character in the past, but also in the present. She's now officially on the chessboard, and I can't wait to see more of her. Before we end our video, however, I feel like there are a few more elements I want to talk about. Skrulum and Herta have a post-story dialogue, which brings up a few fairly interesting questions. First up, Polka is the one who created the Unknowable Domain. She herself states so while she's hunting us. However, this doesn't make any sense. On one side, she's here in order to stop us from snooping into her past, and on the other side, she wants to prevent a possible knowledge singularity from happening. But if that is the case, why create the Unknowable Domain to begin with? Why do that? And Skrulum, he has a potential answer. Maybe Polka is more interested in our simulated universe project than she makes you believe. After all, every single Genius Society member shares a unique trait, except for maybe Skrulum. They are all fairly awkward when it comes to intersocial relationships. I mean, look at Herta, she doesn't really know how to show emotions. Runmei is lost anyways, and Steven is so shy he doesn't even want to show his face anywhere. And Polka might be the same. Maybe she doesn't like to work in a group because she's a lone wolf, but that doesn't mean that she's not interested in the project itself. I personally could talk about Polka for hours, because I feel like she's one of the more interesting characters in the game, and at least right now our writers can take her story into any direction. However, I hope she ends up being an ally, because goddamn, give me that waifu. Lastly, there's a final post-story scene involving Herta and Patavia, and I want to end our video with that scene, because it is, in my opinion, fairly beautiful and a perfect ending to our Scholars Strife storyline. So let me say it right away. If you liked the video, then do me a favor and share it, like it, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. Now for our scene. An old and frail Patavia lies on her deathbed, her eyes closed as the soft light of a distant star filters into the room. Herta stands nearby watching silently, holding a notebook filled with equations. One of those equations includes the solution to our solitary waves theory. As Patavia's life begins to fade, she opens her eyes one last time to see Herta standing by her side. In her hands, the proof Patavia had once dreamed of. The solitary waves solved at last. Patavia's tired gaze lightens up with wonder and quiet pride, and for a moment the room feels timeless. Herta gently places the notebook within her reach, and Patavia lets out a shaky breath, her voice barely a whisper. Tell me, are you a genius, or just another seeker like the rest of us? Herta pauses, a faint smile touching her lips before she speaks, her voice steady. A scholar. I am just another scholar. With Herta's answer, Patavia closes her eyes for one last time. Her face peaceful, a smile lingering as she lets go. She leaves behind a mystery that will echo for ages. An unanswered question which defies even the greatest minds. Is the universe predetermined or is it chaotic? As Herta watches, she murmurs a quiet farewell, a final nod to the woman who first dared to ask the impossible. Perhaps even Nous doesn't know the answer to that question.